Disney is an industry built on magic and happily ever after. For kids around the world, Disney movies are what dreams are made of. The stories have been inspiring and exciting children since the first animated Disney film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, that came out in 1937. Parents and grandparents share their favourite Disney movies with children and grandchildren. The films are wholesome and positive, loved by parents and children, and everyone in between. When it comes to many of Disney's classic films, however, the polished happy endings are often a long way off from the original fairy tales that inspired them. Torture, hanging, burning, these are just few of the things that Disney cuts out when rewriting century-old fairy tales for the screen. Now, with apologies to ruining your childhood, here are 5 dark Disney origin stories. When people visualize Pinocchio, they see a sweet, young puppet with a desire to be a real boy. The Disney movie tells the tale of his adventures with his friend and advisor, Jiminy Cricket, and how they ultimately lead into his dream of becoming a human. The original creator of Pinocchio, Carlo Collodi, was hoping for a different image. Collodi created the character for a serial story in Italian newspapers with the goal of showing kids the consequences of being bad. Collodi's Pinocchio was cruel and mischievous. His Jiminy Cricket was only referred to as Talking Cricket. When the cricket tried to give Pinocchio some good advice, the puppet boy killed him with a mallet. Pinocchio is constantly tortured in different ways throughout the story, all punishment for bad behaviour. Collodi initially ended the tale with Pinocchio's death by hanging, but because of an outcry from fans, Collodi was forced to continue. So he decided Pinocchio's life would be spared in exchange for even more gruesome punishments from that point forward. Using the power of fairy tales, Collodi revised Pinocchio through the magic of the Blue Fairy, and the wooden boy continues on to more mischievous and foolhardy adventures. Rather than a loving man wishing for a son, Geppetto is the impoverished neighbour of a carpenter who donated a talking hunk of wood to him. Pinocchio goes from adventure to adventure, gambling away money, being duped repetitively by the same conspiring duo, and failing to be the son Geppetto had always dreamed of. The one detailed change that is potentially creepier and more obscene than the original story is the renaming of Collodi's Toyland as Pleasure Island. In the original story, Pinocchio runs away with a friend he meets on the way to school to Toyland, a place where you never have to work, and they simply spend the next 5 months playing every day. In the film, the things the boys get up to are considerably more adult themed, and perhaps a 1940s way of teaching boys that gambling, smoking, and drinking are all bad. The worst element that differs between the book and the film version is arguably the scene where Pinocchio and his friend begin to turn into donkeys because of their careless adventures in Toyland. What Disney doesn't show you is that Collodi had Pinocchio turn fully into a donkey. As such, he is sold to a man who tried to kill the donkey by drowning him in the sea so that he can be skinned. However, fish eat the flesh of the donkey and Pinocchio escapes from the carcass as well as the evil man. Even if the story was aimed at adults, some might agree that the original Italian tale is not for sensitive audiences. Disney's Sleeping Beauty is a classic tale of a princess in distress and a prince who comes to her rescue. The original 17th century Italian tale has similar beginnings. The princess, named Talia, pricked her finger on a spindle and was sent into a deep sleep, fulfilling an earlier prophecy. The rest of Talia's tale, however, is too gruesome to be a children's tale, The man who came to Talia's rescue is a king, not a prince. The king's kiss did not awake Talia. He instead gathers the fruit of her love, which is a nicer way of saying he raped her while she slept. 9 months later, she gave birth to twins, and one of them sucked the splinter from her finger, waking her up. Talia and the king fall in love, but the king is still married. His queen orders the twins to be kidnapped, cooked, and fed to an unknowing king. Luckily, the cook refused this order and gave the children to his wife to keep safe and killed 2 newborn lambs instead. That night, while eating dinner, the queen still thinks that the children are being cooked and keeps making weird comments to the king, alluding to the fact that he is eating his own children. The king, unknowing of her plan, gets annoyed and decides to leave and stay the night at a villa. The queen then orders Talia to be sent to her castle, where she makes the order for Talia to be burned on a stake. Talia managed to delay the execution just enough time for the king to get back. The king rushes in and finds a naked Talia standing face to face with his wife. After finding out the queen's plan, the king orders her and the cook to be burned on a stake. The queen was executed, but the cook managed to confess the truth to the king, saying he saved the children. Once reunited with his kids, the king rewarded the cook with great riches and lived happily ever after with Talia and the 2 children. The Grimm brothers' story starts with Cinderella's mother dying and her father remarrying shortly after. The stepmother and stepdaughters, who are portrayed as beautiful in this version, treat Cinderella like a slave. They constantly moan at her, refuse to feed her unless she earns it, take away her clothes and even the furniture in her room, meaning she is forced to sleep by the fireplace. This is where she earns her name Cinderella, by constantly being dirty from sleeping by the cinders. Cinderella plants a tree in her backyard where her mum was buried, only watering it with her tears. Once this tree grows, birds start to live there. These birds act sort of like they do in the film, as in exchange for Cinderella taking care of them, the birds bring her anything she wishes. Also like the movie, the royal family is planning a party in the prince's honour, inviting every beautiful girl in the kingdom so he can choose one to be his bride. The stepmother tries to make Cinderella miss the ball by throwing tiny lentils in the fireplace, saying she can only go if she picks them all up in 2 hours. However, Cinderella has an idea and calls for her birds to help her complete this task, completing it in 30 minutes. The stepmother, obviously annoyed at this, instead throws double the amount of lentils on the ground, saying Cinderella had to pick them up within 90 minutes. Cinderella completes this again with the birds, but her stepmother refuses and just tells her no. Cinderella, obviously upset at this, goes to her tree to cry, asking for wealth and good fortune. The birds come to her aid once again and bring her a dress and slippers made with silver and gold. After putting the dress on and becoming almost unrecognizable, Cinderella heads for the ball, where she becomes the center of attention, even including the prince, who dances only with her all night long. The reason she runs away from the prince in the original story is because the prince asked to escort her home, wanting to know where she lives. Cinderella gets frightened at potentially revealing her true identity and runs all the way home to her backyard. Unlike the film, the ball lasts for multiple days, and on the second day, everything more or less happens the same. The prince only dances with Cinderella, and she again runs home and out of sight. On the third and final night of the ball, the prince anticipates Cinderella running away again and covered the floor in sticky sap, causing one of her slippers to fall off while running away. The prince picked it up and the next morning went on the search for the golden slipper's rightful owner. And this is where the story really takes a dark turn. When the prince arrived at Cinderella's house, she was nowhere to be seen. However, the stepsisters were, and both tried on the golden slipper, to no avail. The older sister's toe was too large, so after advice from her mother, she went to her room, cut off her toe, and went back to the prince with the slipper on her foot. The prince was overjoyed and was about to take her back to the castle when he noticed the slipper was filling with blood. The younger sister decided to try something similar and cut off a large chunk of her heel. The prince once again saw the slipper filled with blood and demanded if there were any other daughters in the house. This is where Cinderella comes in. She tries on the slipper and it's a perfect fit. She leaves with the prince to have a happily ever after. On their wedding day, the stepsisters decided to attend as a show of good faith. However, Cinderella's birds did not like this and swooped down on the two sisters while walking to the event. The birds pick and scratch the sisters' eye out, leaving them completely blind. In Hans Christian Andersen's version of the story, it also follows an underwater princess who is not satisfied with life and the kingdom her father rules. Just like the Disney version, she is fascinated by humans, learning about them through stories her grandmother and older sisters tell her. However, the kingdom has a rule where mermaids aren't allowed to go to the surface unless they are 15 years old. When the story begins, this mermaid princess is only 10 years old. Shortly after she turns 15, she saves a handsome prince from drowning and falls in love with his unconscious body. Curious about what would have happened if she did not save the prince, she asks her grandmother if humans can die like mermaids can. Her grandmother tells her that even though mermaids can live up to 300 years, they don't have immortal souls like humans do. Instead of going to a world above the stars like humans do when they die, mermaids simply dissolve and cease to exist. However, if a mermaid is able to make a human love her and marry her, she'll be given a soul of her own. So although she is fascinated with humans like the Disney version, she is most fascinated with the thought of an afterlife. Unfortunately, in the story, it states that a human can never love a mermaid as they think their fishtails are ugly. Yes, that's exactly what the book says. And this is where the story gets weirder and weirder. The mermaid asks the witch for a way to make her a human. And just like the Disney film, the witch requests her voice in return, as stated in the book as the most beautiful voice in the world. Except in the original book, the witch cuts out the mermaid's tongue. In exchange, the mermaid receives a magic potion, changing her fishtail into legs. However, there are 3 side effects to taking this potion, which are: the transformation will feel like a sword is splitting her down the middle. Every step she takes will feel like she's walking on knives. And if the prince decides to marry someone else, she will die the next morning. She drinks the potion and the prince finds her on the shore of the beach the next morning. The prince finds her beautiful, but without the mermaid being able to speak, the prince can't have any conversation with her and ends up just having to take care of her 24/7. Because of this, the love the prince had changes from that of a partner to that of a child. Even after taking her to many events, the prince just does not see her as a potential spouse. He ends up falling in love with another girl. It turns out that when the mermaid saved him from drowning, she left him on the steps of a holy temple. The girl who the prince falls for was the one at the temple who nursed the prince back to health. Fast forward to the night of his wedding, when they take his ship out into the ocean for celebration. After everybody passes out, the mermaid goes to the edge of the ship to take one last look at the ocean before she dies. At this moment, she sees her sisters swimming to the surface trying to offer her a potential solution. The sisters hand the mermaid a magic knife that if she stabbed the prince in the heart with and let his blood drip onto her feet, she can become a full mermaid once more. However, she loves the prince so much that she could not bring herself to kill him. She throws the knife into the ocean and jumps in shortly after, ready to die and dissolve at any second. A few moments later, however, she realizes she hasn't turned into water, she has turned into air, surrounded by what is described as angels who have not died yet. They turn out to be spiritual beings who traveled around the world spreading light, warmth, and happiness. As the mermaid decided to spare the prince, it earned her an actual chance at having a soul. The angels tell her that if she spends 300 years doing good deeds by her side, she'll be allowed into heaven. Like the movie, the original book follows a newborn faun named Bambi who is the son of the Great Prince, although he does not find this out for a while. The only spectator of his birth is a single magpie instead of the whole forest. The baby's mother takes him to the meadow to meet some of the other animals, including Friend Hare, who is the book's version of Thumper, except in the book he does not play a huge role. Several of the animals, including Friend Hare, congratulate the mother on the fine young prince. Bambi is so young, however, that these words are meaningless to him and he doesn't understand them. Before reaching the meadow, Bambi's mother pulls him aside and gives him a warning about not paying attention to your surroundings. She adds that if she ever tells him to run, he should run to the thicket as fast as he can, even if he sees her fall down. During a later trip to the meadow, he's introduced to his aunt Ina, her daughter Feline, and her brother Gobo. The three fawns get along well, and in the book, it's Feline and Gobo who make up Bambi's inner circle, not Thumper and Flower. As time goes on, Bambi's mother becomes a lot less nurturing compared to when he was younger. For example, when Bambi tries to snuggle with her to sleep, she pushes him away and tells him he is no longer a baby anymore. However, there is a reason for this, as the next morning, his mother and aunt abandon the three children. They were left alone for a while, but the mum and aunt eventually came back when hunters started to appear. During the winter months, the deer in the forest huddled together for warmth and survival. New characters appear from this, such as Marina and Old Nettler. They begin to talk about the hunters when they suddenly realize that they're approaching them. There's a mass stampede from this, and Bambi sees his mother fall. He continued to run like his mother taught him and comes across Gobo lying on the ground injured. He was left behind from the pack because he couldn't keep up. The survivors of the massacre eventually find each other, and when they go back to look for Bambi's mum and Gobo, all they can find is the footprints of the hunters. Fast forwarding a few months to mating season, Bambi has grown and is excited to find a mate. He eventually wins over Feline after fighting off two other potential suitors. One day, a hunter would imitate Feline's call and nearly lure Bambi to his death, only narrowly escaping. His father, the Great Prince, who has hardly been around Bambi in his early life, turns up out of nowhere and says he should focus more on survival than mating. Bambi takes this advice seriously, and by the end of the mating season, has basically lost all interest in Feline. Instead, wanting to be near his father and learn all of his knowledge. Sometime later, Bambi comes across another deer that is acting strange, and right when he was about to fight him, he realized it was Feline's brother, Gobo. The book states that the hunter that shot Gobo felt bad about killing a young fawn and nurtured him back to health and let him back into the forest. What sounds like a nice, sweet story takes a turn when Gobo recognizes his old master walking through the forest and approaches him, only to be shot dead. As time passes, Bambi and his father grow closer and closer, with his father starting to share survival tips with his son. Bambi learns that to survive, you must travel alone, stay hidden, and rely only on yourself. Like the Disney movie, when Bambi is shot in the shoulder, his father encourages him to keep moving, also letting him shelter to recover. Once Bambi is fully recovered, his father tells him that he has one last lesson to teach him. He takes him to a hunter's corpse lying on the ground covered in blood with a hole in his neck, showing Bambi that the hunters are not all powerful like the rest of the animals believe, and that there is a more powerful presence watching over them. After the conversation, the Great Prince says that his work is finished and he must find a place to lay down and die. He states his goodbyes to Bambi, saying he loves him and is proud, and heads into the forest. For the remainder of the book, Bambi ventures on by himself. However, sometime later, he comes across an aged feline and sees two crying fawn, later implied to be his children. He scolds the fawns, saying they need to learn to be alone, and finally, walks back into the forest. Hey everyone, I hope you're well. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, all I ask that you consider to like and subscribe. Also, do you have any more dark Disney origin stories? If so, let me know of them down below, and I'll probably make a part 2 to this. But anyway, I wish you all the best, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.